At my son's funeral, his widow, Vivian, handed me custody papers, demanding I raise my grandsons. She wanted his fortune, not his children, threatening to send them away if I refused. As I signed, holding my grieving boys, a quiet resolve settled within me. This wasn't just about them anymore. I invite you to like, share, and let me know where you're listening from as I share my story. The earth was freshly turned, a dark gaping wound in the otherwise pristine green lawn of the cemetery. Eleanor stood before it, feeling as if her own heart had been ripped from her chest and buried alongside her son, William. The raw ache was a physical burden, making every breath a shallow, painful effort. On either side of her, her 8-year-old grandsons, Thomas and Ethan, clutched her hands, their small fingers intertwining with hers in a desperate grip. Their faces were streaked with tears, their eyes and lost, reflecting the same profound grief that consumed her. William, their father, her only child, was gone. A throng of mourners dotted the landscape behind them, a sea of solemn black figures whispering their condolences, offering their silent support. But amidst the shared sorrow, one figure stood out in stark, unsettling contrast. William's wife, Vivian, stood a little apart from the main group, her elegant black dress doing little to soften the hardness in her posture. Her head was bowed, but not in grief. Eleanor watched, a fresh wave of nausea rising within her, as Vivian subtly pulled out her phone, her thumb idly scrolling through something on the screen. It was a fleeting gesture, almost imperceptible, but to Eleanor it screamed volumes. Vivian was detached, already moving on. Eleanor squeezed the boys' hands, pulling them a little closer. William had been everything to her, her confidant, her joy, her reason for living since her husband had passed years ago. He was a bright, ambitious man, full of life and laughter, a devoted father, and a loving son. His sudden death, a cruel twist of fate in a car accident, had shattered their world. She remembered William's booming laugh, the way he'd always made time for her, even as his business thrived and his family grew. He had been the anchor. And Vivian? Eleanor had always observed a certain coolness in Vivian, an underlying pragmatism that sometimes bordered on self-interest. But at his own funeral, the woman was checking her phone. It was an insult to William's memory, a profound disrespect to the man who had loved her fiercely. The service concluded, the last prayers whispered into the cool autumn air. People began to disperse, leaving flowers and memories behind. Eleanor led Thomas and Ethan towards the waiting car, their small bodies heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. That's when Vivian intercepted them. She approached, not with a comforting arm or a shared tear, but with a stiff, determined gait. In her hand, she held a slim manila folder, its contents a mystery that Eleanor suddenly dreaded. There was no softness in Vivian's expression, no lingering shadow of grief. Instead, her face was set in a mask of cold calculation, her eyes sharp and unnervingly clear. "Eleanor," Vivian began, her voice devoid of its usual polite lilt, now crisp and devoid of emotion. "We need to talk, now." Eleanor blinked, still reeling from the funeral, her mind foggy with sorrow. "Vivian, please," she pleaded, glancing at the boys who instinctively pressed closer to her legs. "The children. Can't this wait? They're exhausted." Vivian gave a dismissive flick of her hand, as if brushing away a bothersome fly. "This can't wait. It's about the children." She opened the folder, pulling out several official-looking documents. Eleanor's eyes widened, a cold dread seeping into her bones. "I'm sure you understand that with William gone, things have changed. I've decided it would be best for everyone if you took full custody of Thomas and Ethan." The words hung in the air, a cruel, impossible echo. Full custody. Eleanor's mind struggled to process the meaning. Vivian wanted her to take the boys, not temporarily, not as a grandmother helping out, but permanently. Full legal custody. It was an abandonment, plain and simple, delivered with the chilling nonchalance of someone discussing the weather. Eleanor felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. She loved her grandsons fiercely, more than life itself, but the sheer audacity, the callousness of Vivian's demand was a physical blow. Her own son had just been laid to rest, and his wife was already discarding his children like unwanted possessions. "Vivian, what are you saying?" Eleanor managed to choke out, her voice barely a whisper. Thomas and Ethan looked up at her, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, their innocent eyes filled with confusion and fresh tears. Vivian sighed an impatient sound. It's all here, legal documents. It makes perfect sense, Eleanor. You're their grandmother, you love them. You're retired. I, on the other hand, have William's company to manage now. And the beach house, of course, those things require my full attention, free of complications. She gestured vaguely towards the boys as if they were inconvenient obstacles to her grand plans. I'll need to sell the family home, naturally for liquidity. The boys would only get in the way. Eleanor felt a surge of white-hot anger, momentarily eclipsing her grief. Complications? They are your sons, Vivian, William's legacy. And you're talking about selling their home, managing a company, and abandoning them for a beach house? Vivian's eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. I'm offering them to a loving home. The alternative, she said, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper, is that I simply send them to boarding school. Far away. Somewhere they'll be looked after but won't interfere with my life. You wouldn't want that, would you? The threat hung heavy in the air, a cruel weapon aimed directly at Eleanor's deepest vulnerability, her love for her grandsons. Boarding school, away from family, away from love, away from the only stability they had left. The image was unbearable. Eleanor looked down at Thomas, his small face still wet with tears, and saw William's eyes staring back at her. Those same intelligent, loving eyes that had always sought her out, always found comfort in her presence. She couldn't let Vivian do that to them. She wouldn't. With a trembling hand, Eleanor reached out, taking the pen Vivian held out. Her fingers wrapped around it, cold and numb. She looked at the signature line on the document, then back at Thomas, then at Ethan, who had buried his face against her side. A fierce, protective love surged through her, mingling with the crushing weight of daunting responsibility. She would do this. For William, for them. She would be their rock. Drawing a shaky breath, Eleanor scribbled her signature onto the line, her hand firm despite the tremor. Good, Vivian said, snatching the folder back, a triumphant glint in her eyes. I knew you'd see reason. She knelt briefly, putting on a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. Boys, Grandma Eleanor is going to take care of you now. Mommy will visit soon, I promise. The words were empty, hollow, even to Eleanor's ears, and the boys continued to cry, sensing the finality of the moment. Vivian stood up, gave a quick, dismissive wave, and turned on her heel. She walked briskly to her waiting car, slid into the driver's seat, and drove away without a single backward glance, leaving Eleanor alone with two sobbing children at the grave of their father. Eleanor sank to her knees, pulling Thomas and Ethan into her embrace, holding them tightly against her heart. Their small bodies shook with grief, their tears soaking her coat. She looked at the freshly turned earth, then at the disappearing car, and a silent vow formed in the depths of her soul. Vivian may have valued William's company and a beach house above all else, but Eleanor knew with a certainty that transcended all her pain that these boys, her grandsons, were truly priceless. She would love them, protect them, and raise them with all the strength and love she had left. The first week was a blur of tears and silence. My grandsons, Thomas and Ethan, cried themselves to sleep every night, whispering their mother's name into their pillows. Each morning I hoped the phone would ring, a sign that Vivian had reconsidered, that a mother's heart had finally stirred. But the silence persisted, a cruel echo of her indifference. I enrolled the boys in the public elementary school, just a few blocks from my small apartment, a stark contrast to the elite private academy William had so proudly sent them to. One afternoon, Thomas looked up at me, his eyes large and vulnerable. Grandma, why doesn't Mommy want to see us anymore? My throat tightened. How do you explain such a betrayal to an 8-year-old? I called William's attorney, Arthur Finch, who confirmed Vivian's actions were legal, and she had no financial obligations to the boys. Yet Arthur promised to investigate options, a tiny glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. A few days later, a delivery truck pulled up. The boys' belongings weren't in boxes, but in black garbage bags, carelessly tossed into the back of a pickup. It was a final cold gesture from Vivian. I spent every waking moment trying to transform my modest apartment into a sanctuary, a true home for my grandsons. But the questions followed me, from other parents at school pickup, from neighbors, from strangers. Where's their mother? I learned to smile and deflect, to weave polite fictions that didn't quite mask the underlying sadness. Then Arthur Finch called again. His voice, usually so calm and professional, was laced with sympathy. Eleanor, he began, I'm so sorry. I've looked into every avenue, but there's nothing. William's will was airtight. Everything went to Vivian. The boys have no legal claim to anything. The words landed like a physical blow. The last flicker of hope died. William, in his boundless trust and love for his wife, had left everything to her, never imagining she would cast his children aside. No inheritance, no trust fund, no financial support whatsoever. The injustice was staggering, a bitter pill to swallow. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling, the receiver still warm against my ear. My nurse's salary, while steady, was modest. It had been enough for me, living alone. But now there were 2 growing boys, 2 hungry mouths, 2 active bodies needing new clothes, school supplies, and the endless small expenses that accumulate. The bills began to mount, a relentless tide threatening to engulf us. I squeezed every penny, stretched every meal, sacrificing my own small comforts to ensure the boys had what they needed. Each evening, as I tucked them into their beds, their innocent faces etched with a lingering sadness, I felt the crushing weight of their future resting squarely on my shoulders. A month after the funeral, the phone rang, displaying Vivian's number. My heart leaped, then sank with a mix of dread and faint hope. Perhaps she was calling to check on them, to express some remorse. I answered, bracing myself. Eleanor, how are you? Her voice was bright, almost sickeningly cheerful, as if she were calling from a sun-drenched resort, not from a life she had abruptly disconnected from. I'm just calling to let you know I'm off, traveling to find myself, you know. My grip tightened on the phone. Traveling? Vivian, what about the boys? A faint, impatient sigh. Oh, them. Well, I'm sure they're fine with you. I just wanted to touch base. Tell them I said hello. She paused, and I could almost hear the smile in her voice. No need to put them on, darling. I'm rushing to catch my flight. We'll talk again soon. Bye. And with that, she hung up. Not a single question about their well-being, not a flicker of maternal instinct, just a breezy announcement of her new, unburdened life. I stared at the phone, a cold fury rising within me, so intense it made me tremble. Ethan, who had been playing quietly nearby, looked up, his small voice breaking the silence. Was that Mommy? Did she say she loves us? My heart fractured a little more. How could I tell him the truth? How could I explain that his mother, who had once held him and read him bedtime stories, now cared more about finding herself than finding him? Yes, sweetie, I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She said she loves you very, very much, and she hopes you're being good for Grandma. The lie felt heavy but necessary. It was a shield against a truth too cruel for a child's tender heart. In the quiet evenings after the boys were asleep, I sometimes found myself scrolling through Vivian's public social media profiles. Each post was a new stab to my gut. Glamorous photos from exotic locations, a crystal-clear beach in the Maldives, a bustling market in Marrakesh, a chic cafe in Paris. Each picture, a testament to a life of unimaginable luxury and endless travel, funded entirely by William's hard work, his dreams, his legacy. The money he had earned, the company he had built, now bankrolling Vivian's selfish quest for self-discovery, while his children lived in a small apartment, yearning for a mother who had erased them from her life. The injustice burned within me, a steady, simmering fire. Life in my small apartment became a relentless rhythm of work, care, and quiet struggle. My nurse's uniform was my second skin as I pulled extra shifts, worked weekends, and volunteered for every holiday that offered overtime pay. Every dollar earned was a necessity, carefully allocated to cover food, clothes, school supplies, and the unexpected costs that inevitably arose when raising 2 active boys. My own needs receded, becoming luxuries I could no longer afford. There was no time for rest, no room for self-pity. My grandsons, Thomas and Ethan, depended on me, and I would not fail them. The painful reminders of William's lost legacy continued to surface. Just 2 months after his death, a for sale sign appeared in front of the beautiful beach house. It was a place where William had spent his summers as a child, a cherished retreat he had carefully renovated for his own family. He'd poured his heart into it, envisioning generations of laughter and memories within its walls. Now it was just another property listed online, its unique charm reduced to a series of glossy photographs. Vivian wasted no time. The house, full of memories of William's happy childhood and the boys' joyous summers, sold quickly, no doubt adding a substantial sum to her rapidly expanding travel fund. Next came William's construction company, the business he had meticulously built from the ground up. He'd poured years of sweat, strategic vision, and relentless dedication into making it a thriving enterprise, employing dozens of people and providing for his family's secure future. Vivian, with her total lack of business acumen and even less interest, put it on the market almost immediately. Without William's guiding hand, the company quickly faltered, its reputation suffering under Vivian's indifferent and often incompetent oversight. The sale was rushed, desperate, and ultimately a disaster. It went for a fraction of its true worth, a mere shadow of the robust business William had left behind. I watched, helpless and heartbroken, as everything William had worked for, everything he had built for his family's security, vanished. The company, the house, the financial stability, all gone, swallowed by Vivian's insatiable desire for an unburdened, self-indulgent life. It fueled her endless travel, her expensive tastes, her relentless finding herself journey across the globe, documented in painstaking detail on her social media for all the world to see. It was a brutal betrayal of William's memory, a desecration of his life's work. Despite the mounting financial pressures and the constant ache in my heart, I found solace and strength in Thomas and Ethan. They were growing, adapting, and revealing flashes of their father's best qualities. Thomas, though still carrying a quiet sadness, was incredibly observant and began to show a remarkable determination. He focused intently on his schoolwork, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if driven by an invisible force. He was curious, always asking questions, eager to understand how things worked. Ethan, the younger, was a fount of kindness and empathy. He was quick to offer a comforting hug, to share his last cookie, to notice when I looked tired and offer to help in small, sweet ways. In their resilience, their innate goodness, I saw William. His strong will, his compassionate heart, his unwavering integrity. These were the true treasures he had left behind, gifts that Vivian, with all her greed and indifference, could never diminish or destroy. She could sell houses and companies, but she could not sell the spirit of William that lived on in his sons. This, I realized, was the most valuable part of his legacy. 6 months after the funeral, a raw, cold ache still lingered, but a new resolve was beginning to bloom in my heart. One evening, as I was tucking Thomas into bed, he looked up at me, his eyes wide and earnest in the dim light of his bedroom. He was only 8 years old, but in that moment, he spoke with the conviction of a man twice his age. "Grandma," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "when I grow up, I'm going to buy back Daddy's house." He paused, his gaze steady, then added, "And I'm going to get back everything else Mommy took from us." My breath hitched. The intensity in his young eyes, the quiet determination in his voice, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a childish boast, it was a promise, spoken with a depth of feeling that belied his age. In that moment, for the first time since William's death, a tiny, fragile spark of hope flickered within me. It wasn't about revenge, not truly, but about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully theirs, about honoring William's memory. I leaned down and kissed his forehead, my heart overflowing with a mix of fierce love and profound gratitude. "I know you will, Thomas," I whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know you will." As I left his room, a new understanding settled upon me. Vivian had believed that by taking William's material wealth, she had gained everything. She had believed that by discarding his children, she had freed herself. But she was profoundly mistaken. She had underestimated the power of love, the unbreakable bond of family, and the resilient spirit of children shaped by a good father. She had underestimated the capacity for love to rebuild, to create something even stronger from the ashes of betrayal. She had only seen money and possessions, never realizing that the true legacy of William, his heart and soul, lived on in his sons and in me. And together we would not only survive, we would thrive. 7 years later, my small apartment had transformed. It wasn't just a place we lived, it was undeniably home, filled with the warmth of shared laughter, quiet comfort, and the undeniable presence of two growing boys. Thomas was now 15, tall and lean, with a serious gaze that held a remarkable intensity. He had inherited William's sharp mind and an uncanny business acumen, visible in the way he approached every task, from school projects to his odd jobs around the neighborhood. Ethan, at 13, was gentler, more open, a mirror of William's compassionate heart. He possessed an emotional intelligence that allowed him to connect deeply with others, a quiet observer of feelings and nuances. The walls of our apartment, once bare, were now adorned with a tapestry of their lives. School photos charted their growth year by year, their smiles reflecting the security they had found with me. Academic awards and sports ribbons were proudly displayed, testaments to their hard work and burgeoning talents. Ethan's corner of the living room was a vibrant explosion of creativity, intricate sketches of animals, colorful abstract paintings, and small, carefully crafted sculptures. His artistic flair was undeniable, a peaceful counterpoint to Thomas's more methodical nature. Thomas's corner, by contrast, was a testament to his ambition. His self-built desk, constructed from repurposed wood and a sturdy old door, was meticulously organized. Stacks of business books, their pages dog-eared and highlighted, sat alongside notebooks filled with diagrams, market analyses, and complex financial calculations. Even at 15, his ideas were sophisticated, far beyond what one would expect from a high school student. He had an innate understanding of economics, a natural feel for strategy that reminded me so much of William. One crisp autumn evening, Thomas called me over to his desk, his eyes gleaming with a focused excitement I knew well. He pointed to a section of the local newspaper, carefully folded open. "Grandma, look." My gaze followed his finger to a real estate listing. My heart gave a sharp, involuntary lurch. It was the beach house, William's beloved beach house, back on the market. Only this time, the asking price was nearly double what Vivian had sold it for. "It's back," he stated, his voice quiet but firm, "just like I promised." I remembered that night, 7 years ago, when a heartbroken 8-year-old had made a vow that now seemed impossibly close to fruition. "You remember," I whispered, a wave of emotion washing over me. "Of course I remember," Thomas replied, his gaze unwavering. "Every single day." He then launched into what he called his acquisition strategy, a meticulously detailed plan. He explained how he had been studying property markets, not just locally, but nationally, understanding trends and valuations. He talked about his part-time job at the local grocery store, saving every penny, and how he had spent hours observing bank loan meetings through the window of a financial institution next door, gleaning insights into interest rates and collateral requirements. He spoke of networking with older, successful entrepreneurs he'd met through his part-time work, absorbing their advice like a sponge. I listened, my heart swelling with a mixture of immense pride and a familiar, nagging worry. William had been ambitious, yes, but he had always been guided by a strong moral compass. "Thomas," I said gently, placing a hand on his arm, "I'm so incredibly proud of you. Your intelligence, your drive. It's truly remarkable. But please promise me something. Promise me you won't let success change who you are. Your father built his business with integrity, with respect for others. That's what truly mattered to him." He met my gaze, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I know, Grandma. You remind me every day." And it was true. I had made it my mission to keep William's memory alive, not just as a father, but as a man of principle. During our nightly dinners, I would share stories of William, how he had refused a lucrative contract because it meant cutting corners on safety, how he had always treated his employees with fairness and generosity, how he had prioritized his family above all else. These anecdotes weren't just sentimental tales. They were lessons, subtly woven into the fabric of their upbringing, reinforcing the values William would have wanted them to embrace. Meanwhile, Ethan, with his kind heart and gentle spirit, was carving out his own path. His passion was animals. He spent his afternoons volunteering at the local animal shelter, his patience and empathy a balm to the rescued creatures. He spoke of wanting to become a veterinarian, his eyes lighting up as he described helping injured birds or comforting frightened stray dogs. His dreams were as clear and pure as Thomas's were ambitious. One quiet evening, as we sat together on the sofa watching a nature documentary, Ethan turned to me, his brow furrowed slightly. The question came out of nowhere, after years of unspoken silence on the matter. "Grandma," he asked, his voice soft, do you think Mom ever thinks about us?" The question caught me off guard. Years had passed since Vivian's last fleeting call, years since her social media posts had stopped popping up in my feed. I had learned to navigate the painful absence, to fill the void with my love and the boy's growing resilience. But a child's heart, no matter how old, still held a lingering flicker of hope for their birth mother. I took a moment, choosing my words carefully. How do you explain an absence born of selfishness without poisoning a child's perception of love? "Ethan, darling," I began, stroking his hair, "people show their love in many different ways, and sometimes people get very lost in their own problems, their own journeys, and they don't always make the best choices. It doesn't mean they don't feel things, but it can make it hard for them to show it." It was a vague, gentle explanation, skirting the harsh truth while still acknowledging the reality of Vivian's absence. He nodded slowly, perhaps understanding more than I gave him credit for, perhaps simply accepting the comfort in my voice. We sat in silence for a while longer, the documentary animals filling the quiet space, a silent testament to the enduring power of family, even in its most unconventional forms. If you've been gripped by our journey so far, please keep watching. Like this story, share it with your friends, and subscribe to follow what happens next. You won't want to miss the shocking twist to come. As Thomas turned 16, his routine shifted, becoming even more focused, more driven. He wasn't just observing from afar anymore. He was actively building. After school, instead of heading straight home, he'd spend hours at the local library, not for homework, but for something far more ambitious. He devoured books on entrepreneurship, marketing, and the nuances of small business management. He researched market gaps, observed consumer behavior, and meticulously outlined his next steps. The library's hushed atmosphere became his war room, its endless shelves his arsenal of knowledge. One evening, he sat me down at the kitchen table, a stack of papers spread before him. His eyes, so like William's, held that same intense sparkle when he was passionate about an idea. "Grandma," he began, his voice brimming with barely contained excitement, "I've got it. My first real business." He explained his plan. He would acquire old, discarded computers from libraries and schools, refurbish them, and then sell them at affordable prices to low-income families in our community. "It's a win-win," he reasoned, his finger tapping a neatly typed proposal. "Libraries upgrade, families get essential tech, and I build capital." He then revealed he'd been saving every penny from his part-time jobs for 2 years, meticulously tracking his income and expenses. More astonishingly, he had secured a meeting with Mr. Davies, a senior loan officer at the very bank he'd been observing, to discuss a small business loan. He presented his projections, his marketing strategy, even a detailed breakdown of his refurbishing process. I listened, my heart swelling with an almost overwhelming mixture of pride and a familiar, quiet fear. This wasn't just a teenage whim. This was Thomas, actively and methodically, laying the foundation for the promise he'd made to me 7 years ago. He was truly going to buy back Daddy's house. Thomas's computer refurbishing business, which he proudly named Thomas's Tech Solutions, quickly found its footing. Our small apartment's storage unit, a space typically reserved for dusty seasonal decorations, was transformed into a bustling workshop. Used monitors, keyboards, and CPUs were carefully piled, awaiting their transformation. Thomas spent countless hours meticulously cleaning, repairing, and upgrading the machines. Ethan, with his natural aptitude for order, became his eager assistant after school, helping to test the refurbished equipment, organize inventory, and even assist with the occasional delivery. The boys, working side by side, formed an efficient team, their camaraderie a source of constant joy for me. The business grew steadily. Thomas's reputation for quality and fair pricing spread through the community, and soon orders were coming in faster than he could fulfill them. One evening he presented me with a new spreadsheet, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Look, Grandma," he said, pointing to a column of figures. "At this rate, if I keep reinvesting and growing, I project enough for a significant down payment on the beach house by the time I'm 25, maybe even sooner." My pride was boundless, but so was my apprehension. "Thomas, darling," I said, my voice soft, "this is incredible. You're so talented, so driven. But please remember there's more to life than business and property. Your father worked hard, but he always made time for joy, for family, for simply living." He nodded, a serious expression on his young face. "I know, Grandma, but this isn't just about money or property for me. This is about proving her wrong, proving that her abandonment wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of ours." His words, so mature and laced with a quiet fire, left me speechless. He wasn't just building a business. He was building a testament to resilience, a monument to their father's memory against Vivian's betrayal. As Thomas turned 17, a new, unexpected development occurred. A sleek black car pulled up to our modest apartment building. A woman emerged, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of polished professionalism. She introduced herself as Rhiannon Price, a representative from Coastal Development Group, a large, well-known real estate and development firm. She explained that she had heard about Thomas's tech solutions through various community channels and was incredibly impressed with his initiative and the success he had achieved. Rhiannon's proposition was enticing, almost too good to be true. She offered to buy Thomas's burgeoning business outright. Not only that, but her company would offer him a position as a consultant, provide full funding for his college education, anywhere he wanted to go, and immerse him in their real estate division, giving him invaluable hands-on experience in property acquisition and development. It was an offer that promised to fast-track his dreams by years. However, there was a catch, a standard but surprisingly broad non-compete clause that would effectively prevent him from starting a similar business or acquiring certain types of properties in the region for a significant period. Thomas, ever the astute businessman, felt a prickle of suspicion. Why such a generous offer for a small, local refurbishing business? Why the unusually restrictive non-compete clause? He confided in me, "It feels like they know more about us than they're letting on, Grandma. Like they're not just interested in the business, but in something else." The answer to Thomas's unspoken question came not long after, and from the most unexpected source. Ethan came home from school one afternoon, his usually cheerful face clouded with worry. "Grandma," he said, breathless, "Oliver's mom told me something weird." Oliver's mom worked at a busy real estate office downtown, a hub of local information and gossip. "She said this Irish lady has been calling their office a lot lately, asking about us, about the boys and our family, and what Thomas is doing with his business." The Irish lady. The moniker was unmistakable, etched into my memory from the early days of Williams' company, when Vivian, with her distinctive accent, was a new glamorous presence. My heart sank, a cold, sickening drop. Vivian, she was back. All the pieces of Rhiannon Price's visit, the overly generous offer, the restrictive clause, the vague feeling of being watched, they suddenly clicked into place with chilling clarity. Vivian wasn't just back. She was clearly involved, somehow orchestrating this from behind the scenes. The thought sent a shiver of dread down my spine. The peace we had built, the stability we had found, was about to be shattered. 8 years. 8 years had passed since Vivian had driven away from William's grave without a backward glance, leaving 2 heartbroken boys and a bewildered grandmother to pick up the pieces. 8 years of silence, broken only by the occasional dismissive social media post detailing her extravagant self-discovery journey. Then, one Tuesday morning, the phone rang, and the caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Vivian. My heart gave a heavy thump against my ribs, a mixture of trepidation and a strange morbid curiosity. I answered, my voice steady despite the internal tremor. Eleanor, it's Vivian. Her voice was different, older certainly, but also devoid of its former breezy confidence. There was a fragile, almost brittle quality to it now, tinged with an unfamiliar desperation. I, I've been thinking about the boys. I'd like to see them. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. See them? After all these years? The sheer audacity of her request was breathtaking. Vivian, I said, my voice firm, allowing no room for negotiation. You gave up your right to see the boys when you signed those custody papers at William's funeral. You chose to abandon them, to cast them aside for William's money. You made your choice then, and it was final. A pause, a slight hesitation on her end. I know, she stammered, a note of panic creeping into her tone. But I've changed, Eleanor. I've done a lot of soul-searching. I want to make things right. I want to be a mother to them. Make things right? The words rang hollow, clanging against the walls of my memory. I sensed not genuine remorse, but a raw, gnawing desperation. This wasn't about love for her sons. It was about something else entirely, something self-serving. There's no making things right for what you did, Vivian, I replied, cutting her off before she could spin another manipulative tale. Those boys are grown now. They're good men. And they didn't need you then, because I was here. They certainly don't need you now. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly as I placed the receiver back in its cradle. I walked through the apartment, my gaze sweeping over the countless photos adorning the walls. Thomas's high school graduation photo, his cap and gown a stark reminder of the future he was building. Ethan's artwork, now more refined, displaying his incredible talent. Their sports trophies, their academic awards, the snapshots of family vacations we'd scraped and saved for. Vivian had missed it all, every milestone, every triumph, every quiet moment of growth. She had chosen a life of fleeting pleasures over the profound, lasting joy of motherhood. And now she wanted back in. The thought was infuriating. That evening after dinner, I sat Thomas and Ethan down. Thomas was now 23, a strapping young man with William's powerful build and sharp intellect. Ethan, 21, was slender, his face sensitive and thoughtful, his eyes reflecting his compassionate nature. I told them about Vivian's call, observing their reactions closely. Thomas's response was immediate and chillingly calm, a cold fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. She stopped being our mother the day she chose William's money over us, Grandma, he stated, his voice flat, devoid of any youthful emotion. There's nothing to discuss. She's a stranger. There was an absolute finality in his tone, a steel barrier erected around his heart. Ethan, ever the more empathetic, was quieter, his brow furrowed in thought. It's strange, isn't it? He mused. After all this time, what could have happened to make her suddenly want to make things right? People don't just change after 10 years of silence without some external push. His observation was astute, echoing my own suspicions. Something must have happened to her for her to come crawling back now. 3 days later, Ethan's intuition proved remarkably prescient. Thomas burst through the door, a crumpled newspaper clutched in his hand, his eyes blazing with a mixture of vindication and triumph. Grandma! Ethan, you're not going to believe this. He spread the newspaper on the kitchen table, pointing to a prominent headline. Coastal Development Group on brink of bankruptcy. Major investors face ruin. My breath hitched. Coastal Development Group, the name of the company that had sent Rhiannon Price to buy Thomas's business. Thomas, I whispered, a dawning realization spreading through me. He nodded, his jaw set. Remember Rhiannon Price and how suspicious I was about their offer? How generous it was in that weird non-compete clause? He looked at me, his eyes sharp. Vivian, she invested in them. She put a huge chunk of William's inheritance into Coastal Development, trying to double her money, probably to keep up her lavish lifestyle. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. Vivian hadn't changed. She wasn't seeking forgiveness or a maternal connection. She was broke. She had squandered William's entire fortune, the very inheritance she had chosen over her children, and now she was desperate. The offer from Rhiannon Price, meant to entice Thomas into selling his successful business and joining their failing company, had been a last-ditch attempt to salvage some liquidity, a means for Vivian to extract money from him, disguised as an opportunity. She ran through it all? I asked, my voice barely audible. William's legacy, his years of hard work, his careful planning for their future, all gone. Every last cent, it seems, Thomas confirmed, his voice cold. And worse, she owes a lot of people a lot of money. He looked at me, then at Ethan. There was no joy in his eyes, only a quiet, resolute determination. She wants us because she needs us. She's finally backed herself into a corner. Justice, I realized, was finally knocking. And Thomas, the boy who had promised to reclaim their legacy, was ready to answer. Despite Thomas's palpable anger and Ethan's keen suspicions, I found myself telling Vivian to come for dinner. It wasn't an invitation born of forgiveness, but strategy. We need to discuss arrangements, I had told her, keeping my voice neutral. Thomas had questioned me later, his eyes narrowed. Why, Grandma? Why give her a platform? Because, darling, I had replied, sometimes you need to see your opponent up close to truly understand their desperation. Vivian arrived on the appointed evening, not with gifts or apologies, but with a single worn suitcase. Her once glamorous facade had crumbled. She looked stressed, her face etched with lines that hadn't been there before, making her appear much older than her 44 years. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple, if still expensive, outfit that couldn't quite hide the strain in her posture. She attempted a warm reunion, her voice fluttering with feigned affection. My boys, look at you, all grown up. She tried to embrace Thomas, but he stiffened, stepping back just enough to avoid her touch. Ethan, ever polite but equally firm, remained at a respectable distance. Both addressed her as Vivian, a deliberate choice that stripped away any pretense of maternal affection. It's been a long time, Vivian, Ethan said, his voice calm but with an edge of quiet precision. 8 years, 2 months, and 16 days, to be exact. His words were a direct hit, shaking Vivian's composure. Her attempted smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of discomfort. Dinner was an exercise in strained politeness. Vivian asked questions about their lives, but her inquiries felt scripted, impersonal, as if she were reading from a cue card. So, Thomas, your little computer business, how's that going? And to Ethan, veterinary school, that sounds expensive. How are you managing that? Her attempts at conversation circled back, inevitably, to their burgeoning success, her underlying motives thinly veiled. She even dared to utter the phrase, family helping family, the words dripping with such profound irony that I had to clench my jaw to keep from snapping. After the awkward meal, Vivian pulled me aside, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Eleanor, she began, her eyes wide and pleading, I'm in real trouble. I've made some bad investments. I owe $2 million. And the confession, though most unexpected, still hit me with a jolt. $2 million. That was William's entire legacy, squandered. My anger, long simmering, finally boiled over. So this is it then? I stated, my voice low and fierce. This isn't about being a mother. This is about money. You only want them now because you need something from them. Just then, Thomas appeared in the doorway, his presence an imposing shadow. You're right, Grandma, he said, his voice cold and steady. Vivian doesn't want to be a mother. She just wants our money. He looked directly at Vivian, his eyes like chips of ice. I know all about Coastal Development Group, Vivian. I know about your investments, and I know you're broke. Vivian recoiled, her face paling. But I'm your family, she whispered, a desperate plea. Family doesn't abandon their children for money, Thomas countered, his voice unwavering. Family doesn't leave them at their father's grave to fend for themselves. He then produced a thick manila envelope from behind his back. My heart pounded as he laid it on the table. Inside were legal documents and a photograph, a beautiful high-resolution photo of William's beach house, looking pristine, newly renovated, and undeniably theirs. 8 years ago, Thomas began, his voice resonating with a quiet power. You chose to sell off everything my father built. You chose to squander his legacy, but you couldn't destroy what truly mattered. He pushed the documents forward. I have just finalized the purchase of Williams Construction Company. It's been restored, rebuilt, even stronger than before. And I bought back the beach house. He met Vivian's stunned gaze, then turned to me, his eyes softening slightly. It's all yours, Grandma. The house, the company, everything. It was rightfully yours from the beginning, for raising us, for giving us a home, for keeping Daddy's memory alive. Vivian gasped, her eyes wide with shock and fury. You can't do this. I had a right to sell those assets. They were mine. And we, Thomas retorted, his voice sharp, had a right to buy them back for the person who deserved them, the person who stood by us, who loved us, who never abandoned us. As Vivian sputtered, trying to find words, Thomas produced another document from the envelope, this one official and stark. He handed it to her, his face impassive. This is a restraining order. It prevents you from approaching us or any of our properties ever again. If you violate it, there will be serious consequences. Vivian stared at the paper, then at Thomas, her mouth agape. You planned this? She whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. Since you walked away from us at Daddy's funeral, Thomas confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. 15 years of planning. I placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder, my heart swelling with an overwhelming love and pride for the man he had become. Vivian, I said, my voice quiet but firm, you made your choice years ago. Now we've made ours. With a final defeated glance, Vivian grabbed her suitcase and stumbled out of the apartment, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of her own greed. The silence that followed was not empty, but filled with a profound satisfaction of justice served. The apartment felt lighter, almost breathable, after Vivian's departure. The air, once thick with unspoken tension and the specter of past hurts, now vibrated with a quiet sense of triumph. Thomas, his expression softened, offered me a set of keys, the simple metal glinting under the kitchen light. The beach house keys, Grandma, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. We can go tomorrow if you like. I was still reeling, trying to process the full weight of what had just transpired. The meticulously planned justice, the years of silent work, the astounding culmination. It was almost too much to take in. Boys, I began, my voice thick with emotion. I don't even know what to say. Ethan, ever the gentle soul, stepped forward and hugged me tightly. You don't have to say anything, Grandma, he murmured into my shoulder. We did it for family. You're our only mother, always. His words were a balm to my raw nerves, confirming that their actions were rooted in love, not just revenge. 6 months later, I walked through the familiar rooms of the beach house, tears blurring my vision. It was as if time had rewound, carefully erasing Vivian's brief, destructive ownership. The house was meticulously restored, every detail brought back to William's exact specifications, and then some. The old wooden floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, revealing breathtaking views of the ocean. Even the faint scent of salt and childhood memories seemed to linger in the air. Thomas stood beside me, watching my reaction with a quiet satisfaction. I bought the house 3 years ago, Grandma, he revealed, his voice soft. It took some time to get the original owners out after Vivian sold it, but once I did, I started working on it. He explained how he had worked with a team of trusted contractors, poring over old family photos I'd unknowingly kept, ensuring every detail, from the color of the paint to the placement of certain antique pieces, was exactly as William would have wanted it. You and Ethan? I asked, a fresh wave of realization washing over me. He nodded. We spent most weekends here, when you were at work, Grandma. We kept it a secret. It was part of the plan. The plan, I repeated, the full scope of his long game finally beginning to unfold before me. Thomas looked out at the ocean, his gaze distant, analytical. My meticulous planning began when I was 15, Grandma, right after you told me about Vivian's call and what Arthur Finch said about her having no financial obligations to us. I started tracking her movements, her investments, her increasing debts. It wasn't hard. She was very public about her finding herself journey, and she wasn't discreet with her money. He turned to me, his eyes holding a new steely intensity. I knew about her investment in Coastal Development Group long before Rhiannon Price ever showed up at our door. I knew it was a bad investment, and I knew she was bleeding money. I just helped orchestrate her final downfall. My mouth felt dry. You orchestrated it? Yes, he admitted without a hint of remorse. I quietly bought significant shares in several of the companies Vivian invested in, using Thomas's tech solutions profits. From within, I influenced decisions, nudged them in directions that, while ultimately legal and within the bounds of standard business practice, exacerbated her losses. I made sure her bad bets got worse. He also confirmed that he had anonymously filed reports with the IRS regarding Vivian's undeclared income from Williams' estate, a move that would lead to further legal complications for her. Ethan then chimed in, his voice more somber. And the authorities are now looking into some of Vivian's more questionable business partnerships from her travels, partnerships that Thomas's research helped uncover. I looked at them, my two remarkable grandsons, now men who had navigated the complexities of financial markets and legal loopholes with such precision and unwavering resolve. My heart swelled with pride, but also with a touch of unease. "Boys," I said, my voice barely a whisper, is this right? Where does forgiveness come into all this? Being the bigger person?" Ethan gently took my hand. "Grandma, forgiveness doesn't mean letting people off the hook for their actions. It doesn't mean there are no consequences. Vivian chose to hurt us. She chose to squander Daddy's legacy. We chose to reclaim it and to ensure she couldn't hurt anyone else with her greed." Thomas, usually so composed, looked away for a moment, then back at me. "Honestly, Grandma, for a long time, I hated her. That hatred, that anger, it drove me. It fueled every late night, every calculation. But now I just feel pity. She lost everything William gave her because she couldn't see anything beyond money. She lost us, and she's lost herself." He paused, then his eyes met mine, earnest and vulnerable. "I gave you the house and the company, Grandma, not just because it's what you deserve, but to prove to myself and to you that I can choose family, true family over profit, that I'm not like her." His words pierced through my lingering doubts, reaching the core of my heart. He had not just sought revenge. He had sought redemption. For their family, for William's memory, and for himself. He had learned the most important lesson of all. 2 weeks after Vivian's dramatic departure, the news arrived. She had been arrested. The charges were extensive: tax evasion, multiple counts of fraud, and intricate inheritance manipulation. My initial reaction was not one of satisfaction, but a profound, weary sadness. It was a tragic end for a woman who had once had everything. Thomas, however, felt a sense of peace. "Now," he said, his voice quiet, "she can't hurt anyone else. No more victims of her greed." The boys then began to unveil the full extent of their vision, a legacy far grander than mere financial reclamation. Thomas outlined his plans for William's reconstructed construction company. "We're focusing on affordable housing, Grandma," he explained, his eyes alight with purpose, "specifically for single mothers and elderly people in need. It's what Dad would have wanted, building communities, not just houses." Ethan, too, shared his dream. "And my low-cost veterinary clinic is taking shape," he added, a gentle smile on his face. "Quality pet care shouldn't be a luxury. We want to serve families who truly need it." Their ambitions transcended personal wealth, reflecting a shared purpose of serving others, of giving back to the community that had supported them. Watching them, listening to their plans, I realized the profound irony of it all. Vivian's abandonment, her act of ultimate selfishness, had, in a strange and painful twist of fate, created two men who deeply understood the true meaning of wealth. Not just financial security, but purpose, community, and the profound act of giving. Then Thomas presented me with a final, astonishing gift. He unfurled a document, the official seal prominent on the page. "These are the incorporation papers for the Eleanor Hayes Foundation," he announced, his voice filled with reverence. "The foundation," he explained, "would be dedicated to supporting grandparents like me, those who had stepped up to raise their grandchildren when biological parents couldn't or wouldn't. It would provide resources, legal aid, and a network of support." Tears streamed down my face. They had transformed their pain into purpose, their abandonment into activism, creating something beautiful and enduring from the ashes of betrayal. 1 year later, the autumn leaves were falling, a brilliant tapestry of red and gold, as we stood once more at William's grave. It was his birthday, a day we now celebrated not with grief, but with quiet pride and shared accomplishments. The Eleanor Hayes Foundation was flourishing, having already supported 43 grandparents in similar situations, providing them with the vital resources they needed. William's company, under Thomas's ethical leadership, had built 20 units of affordable housing, offering safe, dignified homes to families who desperately needed them. Ethan's low-cost veterinary clinic had provided free or heavily subsidized pet care to over 200 families, easing their financial burdens and bringing comfort to their beloved animals. Thomas then spoke, his voice clear and strong in the crisp air. And this year, he announced, looking down at his father's headstone, we're launching the William Hayes Memorial Scholarship for Construction Trades. It's for young people who need a second chance, who want to build something meaningful with their hands and their hearts. I looked from William's name carved in stone to the faces of my grandsons, shining with purpose and love. My mind traveled back to that bleak day, the raw grief, the shock of Vivian's betrayal, the daunting uncertainty of our future. We had come so far, transformed from a fractured family facing an impossible challenge into a beacon of hope and generosity. As we prepared to leave, a thought about Vivian resurfaced. Her sentencing was due soon. Do you think she understands now what she gave up? I asked, looking at Ethan. Ethan considered it for a moment. I think she understands what she lost financially, Grandma, he said, his voice thoughtful. The money, the status, the comfortable life, but I don't think she truly understands what she lost in us, what she gave up in love, in connection, in meaning. Thomas nodded, his earlier anger completely replaced by a profound sense of pity. She traded everything that truly mattered for things that never did, he concluded, a quiet finality in his tone. A few weeks later, a surprising letter arrived, postmarked from the correctional facility where Vivian was awaiting transfer. It was a handwritten letter, the script shaky and unfamiliar. In it, Vivian offered a genuine apology, acknowledging her profound mistakes, the depth of her selfishness, and the pain she had inflicted. She even incredibly admitted that I had become the mother she should have been. It wasn't an attempt to reconcile, but a raw, honest confession. We discussed it, the three of us, our own small family council. We chose forgiveness, not as a path to reunion, but as an act of release for ourselves. It was a quiet internal process, a recognition that it wasn't too late for Vivian to face her own truth, even if it was too late for her to be a part of ours. Later, in the quiet of my own thoughts, I wrote a letter to William, though it would never be sent. I told him everything, how his sons had not only fulfilled his dream of a secure family, but had transformed it into a legacy of unparalleled generosity. I told him how they had built a future not on greed, but on loyalty, sacrifice, and unconditional love. 5 years later, the beach house was a home filled with new laughter. I watched Thomas, now a loving father, teach his own young son how to cast a fishing line into the gentle waves, just as William had taught him. The circle of life, of love, was unbroken, gracefully continuing. Justice, I realized then, wasn't just about reclaiming what was stolen or punishing the betrayer. It was about love persisting, family enduring, in the profound, immeasurable inheritance of love winning, unequivocally, over the barren spoils of greed.